Welcome to Engaging and Empowering School Libraries, a podcast that aims to raise the profile of school libraries by talking about topics that are current across education and teaching. School librarianship can be a very lonely profession. Many work on their own and rarely see the outside four walls of their school library. This week, we're talking about how school librarians can empower themselves and the profession by focusing on the organisations and the schools that they work in. We'll also be chatting about the importance of building support networks within and beyond your school libraries. Tonight, I'm joined, as always, by my co-hosts, school librarians Sabrina Cox and Ruth Maloney. And our guests this evening are Sue Wills MBE Assistant Director of Arts, Culture and Heritage at Surrey County Council, Sue Williamson MBE Vice President of CILIP, and Luke Burton, Director of Libraries at Arts Council England. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Now, I am going to have a little bit of a problem because I've got two C's and two CWs. So bear with me. We will somehow work out who we're talking to as we go through. But why don't we start with a little introduction with Sue Williamson. Can you tell me something about your background and why you think it's important for school librarians to be aware of their organisations and their aims and objectives?
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you for having me along this evening. I'm retired, 6 Saturdays and a Sunday, but I am Vice President of CILIP, and before I retired last November, I'd spent in the course of my life around 30 years in public libraries. Or working for in the field of public librarianship. I finished having done several roles as a head of service, but I managed adult and community learning and arts and culture in the service that I was head of. And then I went to Arts Council England as their director for libraries. So Luke is following, or has followed me in that role, which is a very strategic role. And sorry, the second part of your question was
more about the why do we think it's important that librarians are aware of their organisational aims and objectives?
So I think it doesn't matter what field you work in. As a librarian, you don't work in a vacuum, whether it's in a public library or a health library or a school library. You are an integral part of the organisation that your library is part of. And if you're not aware of what that organisation's concerns and issues are and its aims and objectives, your library is not going to be as relevant as it could be. So, for example, in a school library, you might be thinking that a key issue that's facing head teachers at the moment is the impact of the pandemic. And so the impact on children in terms of health and well-being, how you deal with that. And also just the fact that they have lost so much in terms of school attendance and literacy attainment, and how you might be able to support that. That's just two of the things that I think of off the top of my head. And I think it's really important that the library positions itself as a really key solution to those problems, because it is, and it can. I mean, libraries are all about providing information and supporting people to get that information and to be able to use it. And so that's why I think it's important. And as I say, it doesn't matter which branch of librarianship you're in. I think it's absolutely crucial, because otherwise you're just going to be sidelined.
Absolutely. I think what's lovely about tonight's conversation is the fact that we're talking more broadly than just school libraries, but actually school libraries can be the heart of this conversation, which is fantastic. Sue, the other Sue, Sue Wills, can I bring you in now? Just a brief introduction. You have your history is school libraries, isn't it?
So my first job was a children's librarian, and then I've worked in school library services, and I've worked in school libraries, and I've worked in public libraries. And I've also worked in London boroughs, in counties and unitary authorities like Poole as a professional librarian and as a professionally chartered librarian, which I'm very, very proud of, to hold that qualification. So yes, I started my life as a children's librarian, and let's not share this as it's my big secret. At heart, I'm a children's librarian.
Once one, always one. And so what do you think, though, about, like I know Sue would said a lot about organisational aims and objectives. What do you think? Because sometimes I don't know whether school librarians get involved enough with what is going on in the wider world of organisational aims and objectives, and how do you feel that they can have an impact?
So I think the most important thing, first of all, is to understand that you need to make it clear that you need to have that impact. And going back to what Sue has said, it's being really clear about the organisation's aims and objectives. And it doesn't matter if you're in the tiniest village school or the biggest county council, the same principle applies, whatever the organisation, and whether it's a school library, a public library, a specialist library, an academic library. It's making sure that you're showing how you meet the objectives of the organisation and demonstrating all of that. And Sue's already very eloquently kind of said most of the things I was going to say, but there's one critical bit that really is, for me, I would like people to take away from this part of the talk, really. For me, and Sue's touched on it, the critical thing here is to demonstrate the impact that you have. And to do that, and don't make it complicated. To do that, it's going to vary depending on what you're doing, but it's the basic things like the number of visits to your library, the kind of events that you're doing in your library, the kind of activities, and both the range of activity and the amount of participation. So even if you're counting the number of people coming to your library, it doesn't have to be posh, can be really basic, but it's those figures that really matter. And then if you can get any feedback from users, whatever feedback you can get, even if it's, I came to this event and I had a great time, and then you're able to say that of all the people that came to your event, 95% said they had a great time. That is such a powerful story to tell, no matter what organisation you're part of. And as I say, that's true of any library service. So that's that demonstrating impact. And it can be really basic, simple stuff. That's my takeaway really from this part of the talk.
Absolutely. I think it's really important that we understand, however small a role we seem to be playing, if you attach it to the wider organisation, it becomes so much bigger. So you're right, Sue. It's about not making such a big deal of it in your own head, but actually understanding the bigger impact that you're going to have. Yeah. So sitting very quietly this evening is Luke. Thank you so much for joining us. Can I get you to do the same? Not that there's now much to say about organisational aims, but can you just introduce yourself? And if you do have something else to say, then please feel free, Luke.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And yes, it's lovely to be here as well. Yeah, like you say, a lot of it's been covered, but so my background's in public libraries as well. 15 years I've been a head of service for a couple of years, and also worked on digital projects and in prison libraries and local studies libraries. And I should probably declare an interest as well. I'm a second generation librarian. So both my parents were qualified librarians, and my mum was a school librarian in a secondary school for 20 years. So I'm a little bit biased, I suppose, when it comes to the impact of school libraries. I suppose, yeah, I mean, absolutely. Sue and Sue have both covered a lot of those points around organisational involvement. And I think for me, there's also the element of libraries across the board have never been particularly good at shouting about what they do. You know, there's this piece about the impact the libraries can have and the importance of them. And I think particularly for sort of children and young people in an ever more information saturated world, there are, I think, those skills that libraries and librarians share around knowledge management, information literacy, you know, critical thinking. I think they're ever more important now as well. We coming back to the point around, you know, the impacts of COVID, but misinformation and things that we were seeing around that. So I think there's a range of critical skills that libraries can play. But from that organisational point of view, I think school libraries probably suffer in the way that public libraries have in terms of making their voice heard and demonstrate. I think once people step through the door and they see what they can get, but it's maybe getting them through the door in the first place is part of the challenge.
Absolutely. It's definitely that understanding, isn't it? It's that we have something of value and not everybody is listening. So being able to demonstrate your value is hugely important. Sue, you have your hand up. Do you want to come and join in? Yeah, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm just finding the buttons to
That's all right.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that actually, because I think Luke's absolutely right. we don't shout enough about what we do, but I think it's more than that. I think that when we demonstrate that we're good partners and we can actually deliver against something, we tend to be quite passive. So we tend to be very reactive to what other people want, instead of going in and saying, right, this is your problem, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this. And actually, this is really going to be a benefit to you because of this, 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 and this. And I think what happens is that we tend to be slightly passive as partners and not pushy enough. So it's very easy for other people with louder voices to get their message across, or to seem as if they are the dominant partners in a partnership situation. So I think when anybody goes into doing something which is of real value, it's really important to get the parameters of the partnership right at the beginning. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to deliver. This is what you're going to get from us. And this is what it's going to do to help you. And this is what the outcomes are going to be. I just think I think Luke's absolutely right. We just need to be louder about it.
Yeah, I'm going to say we really aren't very good at it. You know, I just going off kilt ever so slightly. I've just been watching some of the AI in Education conference that was on today, and I also watched the other day. And there are some very big, powerful educational speakers there. You know, librarians should be part of that conversation. And you know, nudging my way in is happening, but the fear factor that you are not good enough or as professional or as it stands in the way of this. And I think, you know, we need to be braver, understand our worth, and actually give ourselves the opportunity to be able to know enough to have these conversations. Can I bring Ruth in?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And Sue, I don't think I've heard it expressed in that way before, but that's entirely how I feel about it. It's not just that we don't speak, it's that we don't offer. We're not the first person in the queue to say, how about this? So related to AI, I was asked to run a session for our applicants to our sixth form next year, and it was pretty much left to me as to what I did. And I thought, well, I'm not going to do anything related to the library at our school. I'm going to do AI. And the minute I did that, people looked at me as if that was, you know, oh, okay, somebody's actually going to deliver this. And it's exactly that. It's not even that I'm advocating for the library. It's just that I've said, this is what I can do. This is what it's going to look like. And I agree. I don't think that comes naturally. And I'm not sure. I mean, I've been in libraries 20 years and I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that before. So you know, maybe I've not been listening to the right conversations, but I hear a lot of people say we don't speak loudly enough, we don't advocate for ourselves, but I don't hear that comment that we're too passive when we join in. And I think that's really, really important.
So let's move on to strategies. So I'm not necessarily talking about school libraries, because obviously you don't all work in school libraries. Do you have examples of where you've successfully aligned your organisational goals with the needs of your profession, and what strategies did you use to achieve this? And we've talked a little bit about a few things that we could be doing, but can I bring Sue Wills back in to answer that one for me?
So I have a 4-point plan, and I've used this 4-point plan wherever I have worked, whether it's a school library or whether it's a public library service. And it's something I would suggest that people literally write a list, and this is the action thing. So of the 4 points, the first one, and we've touched on this already, which is really do your research and really understand the goals of the organisation that you work for. And sometimes it's actually quite difficult to find that. I've been reduced to Googling strategic documents because I can't find it in the organisation I'm actually working for. So make sure that you understand the goals of the organisation you're working for, understand the data that you have, and it can be data about your residents, or it can be data about your catchment area, or it can be data about your users. And in a school, for example, you have the data about your pupil users. So you've got your data, and then thinking about the goals of the organisation, the data, then reflect and think about what you can add to the organisation, what you can add, what you can initiate, or what you can develop. And I use, for example, for public libraries, the Libraries Deliver, which is the national strategy at the moment, which is being reworked. Or the other thing, which I think is incredibly useful, is the Carnegie Shining a Light report, which talks about there's a diagram and a model of a modern public library. It's literally on one side of A4. It doesn't matter who I've shown that to, a chief exec or a library assistant, they all get, oh, okay, I get it now. That's what a modern library looks like. Yes, it is. And it's literally one side of A4. That's it. Simple. And then I think when you've done your research, it's then listening to the needs of users, whether that's your senior leadership team, could be a school, could be the leadership team in the school, or a public library or a council, whatever. And then also listen to those individual users, because again, that gives you that data, that powerful data, that listening. And then my third point is actually have a training and skills plan, and think about, do you and the team have the right skills and knowledge? And then this is the trick here, is conduct a skills audit to identify the gaps. And even if you're on your own, do it for yourself. So you can actually be really thinking really hard about what you need to do for yourself. And a really good thing is the CILIP PKSB, the professional knowledge skills space. You can use that as a really good audit to actually understand maybe what you need to improve on. And then the fourth bit, the last bit, which is the most important bit, is you create an action plan. So you're thinking about the action, the plan you're going to have, the actions you're going to take, the timelines, who's going to do what, if you've got any budget, and then check that against the organisation plan to make sure they match up. And that kind of 4-point plan, which is research, listen, training and skills, and then the action plan, no matter which organisation you're working for, no matter how small, how big, that will actually get you to where you want to be. And it's not rocket science, but we often forget the most basic things, don't we? So that's it in a nutshell from my perspective.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. I think I've seen both Sabrina and Ruth scribbling down, so hopefully we'll be able to repeat that at some point. We will write it down and put it in the show notes. I think it's so true, isn't it? One of the things that I talk about is the importance of your annual report, and actually not writing your annual report at the end of the year, writing it for next year. What is it that you want to achieve and what you're going to, so it's a similar kind of thing. And actually, if we can incorporate those 4 points, I think we'll be on to a winner. So thank you so much. Luke, can I bring you in? What strategies do you use to align your organisational goals?
Well, it's now going to be the Sue Wills 4-point plan. That's what I'll be using in the future. But
I should have brought her in last, shouldn't I?
I think some of it speaks to what Sue Williamson was saying before, that point of not being passive. So I think, colleagues in the service have talked about walking into a room and saying, this is what libraries do, and sort of people switching off. And it's almost back to flipping the message round back to that, this is what you need and how libraries provide it. Because again, not to keep going on about the perception view, but the idea that if you start off, this is what libraries do, people start saying, well, I know what they do. Whereas if you really understand the goals and the aims and the outcomes that your organisation are trying to achieve and how the library can do it, then you've already said this is what you need, and then you're demonstrating how you can do it. So you're building that credibility. And I think you need to be authentic when you're building these strategies. People see through if you're simply trying to pay lip service, if you like. So there really is understanding your organisation and knowing how you as a library can help achieve those. And like Sue Wills said, you've got to sometimes dig around to find those. But Arts Council Let's Create as a strategy, it's very clearly aligns the role of libraries, how Arts Council support them, and how libraries can help support the cultural sector. So there's really got to be that organisational credibility and buy-in. And I think some of that comes from speaking the right language. So my experience of working in public libraries, depending where you sit within your local authority, you need to speak the language of those you're trying to advocate to and deliver against their outcomes. So whether it's public health, whether it's business support, or whether it's schools, I'm not going to claim to know the language that's going to strike a note with education providers and sort of teachers, but it's using that right language, and people within the schools will know what they're trying to achieve against. I think the asking questions, and trying to understand and taking questions as well. So Sue Williamson, one of the bits of advice that really sticks with me that she gave me when I started my role was if someone asks you a question that seems like a trick about libraries, don't assume a level of knowledge. And I think that's, for me, is a really good base to go from, is to, when you're steeped in libraries and you've been in them, you assume that people have an understanding of what they can deliver, and people experience them in different phases of their life. And Sue Wills said the Shining a Light report, talked about people seeing value in libraries but not having used them for a period of time. So I think there's an assumption, not having those assumptions there. And then finally, because it's all I seem to talk about at the moment, is the data point is critical. What is it you're trying to achieve? How are you going to demonstrate it? And what's the evidence you're going to have for it? Because as librarians and library workers, we will say libraries are brilliant because they can do this, and people will say, well, you would say that, but prove it, kind of thing. Which is where the data and your advocates come in, have those unexpected voices that can speak for you. It comes from an unexpected quarter. So yeah, I think the data, the language you use, and sort of doing your research are critical.
Yeah, I was going to say it's funny, the language is a big one. Librarians seem to speak a different language from teachers, although they're talking the same, meaning the same thing. And it's not until you actually really understand that you have to change how you're saying it, that can make a difference. So I think that is hugely important. And data, we're always talking about data, aren't we? We're always talking about, if you can give them data, then they'll understand. And actually we do need to do a lot more of that, because I don't think it's something that we do. I don't think we do it very well. We like to give figures of how many hundreds of books we issued this year, and how many people walked through the door. And as much as that's really important, it's the why that's attached to that that's necessary, isn't it? The fact that the however many books you issued helped raise literacy levels, for example, is the connection that we need to bring. So there is more to this, these strategies than meets the eye, aren't there? Sue, the other Sue Williamson, can I bring you back in?
I mean, my colleagues have covered such a lot there. I think there are perhaps I would agree with everything they've said. There are a couple of things I would add, and one is that if you have a team, what I always used to do when I was doing my service plan was I used to do a golden thread document. So this is what I do as head of service, and this is what every single member of my team, going right down to the bottom, this is what you do in support of that particular aim and objective. So whatever the service plan said, I would put it out so that every single person in the organisation felt valued and understood what it was they brought to that, and how their work supported mine and how my work supported theirs, right the way through the organisation. So I think that, the staff I had really appreciated that. I think communication with your team is absolutely vital. They really appreciate being talked to. Why are we doing this? Why are you introducing that change? Why is this happening? What's the difference it's going to make? The other thing I would say is that I listened last week to Amy from CILIP Wales and Nicola, who was also from the Welsh government, talking to the Senate about the role of libraries and the standards of libraries in Wales. And one of the questions they were asked by somebody, one of the challenges was, libraries do an awful lot. Is there a danger that you are a jack of all trades and master of none? And you know what? That really made me think, because actually we can. There is so much that libraries can contribute to. So I think going back to that original thing about knowing your aims and objectives of the organisation you're in, try and focus on a few things that you want to do in your organisation. You could probably do lots of stuff, but that weakens the role that you have and the impact that you have if you're trying to do too much at once. So what are the really key things that you want to do from which you can then build? Because I thought, the hackles on my neck went up when I heard that challenge, because I actually thought, that is just so typical. Libraries just are dilettante. They just fiddle around at the edge of stuff, and they do bits of things instead of actually valuing what libraries bring to the table. And the biggest example of that I have is, I think, listening to my colleagues from health libraries about what they did during the pandemic. The fact that they did all the research for the medics, put all the up-to-date information in front of those medics so that they didn't have to do it themselves. And that saved so much time and so much effort and was just a huge part of being able to treat people and spend the time in the clinical forum instead of trying to find out what all the new information was that was coming through. So I think that's all I would add to this, but that's kind of trying to give it a bit of depth or a bit of focus, I think.
So there's two things from that. This golden thread is great if it's coming from the top, if it's coming from a senior leader who understands. Many of the people listening to this are school librarians whose senior leaders hardly even know that they exist or even what they do. So is there any way to create this thread back up to the top? Is there any way? And I suppose we're already answering the question that I'm currently asking, because I suppose it's about helping those senior leaders understand the role that you play. And I think it also links to that second point you made, Sue, about a jack of all trades. School librarians are notoriously yes people. Will you photocopy? Will you fix the laminator? Will you? And we're so desperate to be acknowledged, to be seen as somebody that will help. We get distracted, I think. So have I answered my own question in that? Would you agree? Is there anything that school librarians, Sue, can do to help hook that golden thread back up to the right place?
I think you can look at what, I mean, if you can get sort of a sense of all the aims and objectives that your school has to deliver, and you can then do that reverse golden thread. Okay, this is what you're trying to achieve. This is what I can do. This is what your teachers are doing. This is what, you know, your class monitors, whatever your hierarchy is within the school, this is how it all interlinks. But it is an interlinking thing. It's not the library on the outside. It's an integral part of the work that the school is doing. I suppose that's what I mean. When I was describing it, I talked about the fact that it was because I had a team, and very often in a library service, the staff, the Saturday assistant that does 4 hours a week doesn't see the head of service, you know, doesn't have very much contact with them. And I mean, I had quite a small service to manage, so I was relatively lucky in that sense in terms of geography. But I was very visible in my service. I went round to my libraries, I talked to the staff, I made certain that I was a visible head of service. Plus also I'd worked as a senior library assistant, so I basically said, you know, you can't tell me that you can't do X, Y, and Z, because I've done it. You know, I've been there on that front line, and I know what is difficult and what is not difficult. But I think for me that's a really important part. I think you are as strong or as weak as the team that you are a part of. Absolutely,
I think that's so important. Can I ask the three of you to give, if you've got some examples of some successful collaboration between organisations and external stakeholders and how they've impacted? And I know that it won't relate to school libraries necessarily, but just having an example of why these are important might just help. So can I start with Sue Wills? She needs to unmute.
Yeah, just unmuting myself and just putting my hand down. I just want to go back and just pick up very briefly some of the things that Sue was talking about. And I think just going back and again, being really kind of going back to basics, really. I think in terms of thinking about sort of organisation aims, just want to make the point that, you know, let's check what's already there, what's already in the public domain. You know, often with school websites, people forget the amount of amazing information on a school website will include the school development plan. And so it's thinking about, you know, what does the latest Ofsted report say? about the school development plan. And also, I think it's really important that in schools, we're really clear about what the senior leadership team are focused on. You know, for example, it may be the pupil premium pupils they're really focused on. And also, I'm very keen, and I know we're all on the call, we're very keen to talk about creating our own support network. And we've got some amazing organisations in this country, things like CILIP and the School Library Association. And then I'm also the kind of thing I just want to add before we move on is making sure that you've got your own library development plan. That's absolutely fundamental, I think, having a library development plan. But just going back over now to the kind of the successful collaborations. I think one of the organisations that's so brilliant at doing this for school libraries as well as public libraries is the Reading Agency. And the amazing things that they do in terms of those collaborations. And often, and I've found this when I've talked and through school library services, for example, talking to school librarians and thinking about how do I basically how do I create a step change in what I'm doing, and I've got so little resource. But that's where the benefit of, if you like, partnering up with the Reading Agency, and you can do that. You know, you don't need vast sums of money or anything like that. You can just connect up with the Reading Agency. You've also got ASCL, which is the Children's Librarians Organisation. And then also the other thing I would just put out there, because I think this is not, people don't think about it enough, is LinkedIn. It's making sure that you've got a presence on LinkedIn and find those people that you think, okay, this is a natural ally for me, or this person might help me connect up. And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to have people connect with me on LinkedIn to kind of be that hand up as well. So there's a number of ways in which you connect with that don't cost anything, but are actually out there. And it's basically kind of just putting your hand out going, I need some help, or I could do with some support, or could you help me partner up with this? So just to say all of that, some of the things which are really low cost. And can I just say the latest thing I think, which I'm very, very happy about, because I think it gives librarians a real opportunity to make a mark. And I think we need to talk about it a bit more, maybe not tonight, is the new Ofsted inspection framework. I think that's our secret weapon almost, because we can do so much through that new Ofsted inspection framework. I looked at that and I thought, yes, here's an opportunity for school librarians and librarians to make their mark. So get to know that really well, please. Thank you.
I'll make sure I have a proper read of it before we talk again, Sue. Yeah, I think it is really, really important that we you know, do as much as we can. So can I bring Luke in? We're talking about what are we talking about? The strategies now, the strategies that the impact the library's had. I've lost my question. You can tell this is live. So
we were talking about working with outside agencies, Elizabeth.
Thank you. That's what co-hosts are all about. Luke, do you want to come in and talk about outside agencies for me?
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think, you know, certainly the experiences I've had around it, been in public libraries, and I think, although it's not with another library service, I think the work that the business and IP centres have done with the British Library have been a really brilliant example of external agencies, so certainly outside local authorities, building. It's built the profile of libraries, but it's also done that thing where it's unique. It's harnessed the unique skills that libraries have. So public libraries have had business libraries longer than the business and IP centre network's been in existence. But what it did is it almost supercharged it. So it took the skills that libraries had around intellectual property advice and the collections that they had and the online resources. But then it partnered it with that British Library branding and networking and the huge collection obviously they've got at Boston Spa and at St Pancras, but it kind of supercharged that already existing offer. And for us, when I was head of service in Newcastle, what it did was it put us on the radar. So we built relationships with universities, both of the universities in Newcastle, and we also built relationships with our economic development team. So a bit back to using that language again is things like gross value add and, you know, jobs created and those kind of things. It was the language that spoke to that part of the council, so it put us on the radar. And as far as I'm aware, it's still, you know, quite different from the way that some of the other business and IP centre network is delivered. So it's across the UK now, and the sum of the impact of that is being felt now. But I think on a local level, it really allowed us to use that strength of that relationships to enhance what we did. So it was bringing a little bit of reputation with it, you know, wanting to work with the British Library, but it was using the skills that we already had in-house. And I think, you know, libraries across the board have always been great. That's one of the, you know, having been critical of libraries and said we're not very good at selling our message, libraries are great at partnership working and building partnerships, and sustainable ones as well. You know, and they're drawing on those skills, and maybe it's part of the profession, but knowing where to go to find the support and the answer. So I think back to that kind of the point that's been made before of that Sue Williamson was saying about being a jack of all. You know, libraries aren't always, they're not the answer to everything, but they are part of the solution in a number of cases, and it's finding where that's the case and picking those, sort of targeting that approach where you can, because that's where the difficult sell comes when you're trying to advocate for your service, a universal service that should be accessible and of value to everyone. Where do you target? Because it's a difficult sell to say, well, we're here for everyone. So when you target it towards those areas and you build those trusted relationships, I think that's where you can have that impact.
I think as well is when you have those conversations that allow you to understand where you can help. Very often I've had a conversation with a head teacher or even you know, a teacher, and it's I've suddenly realized that actually I have the perfect tool in my toolbox that is going to help them solve this problem. But if I had not had that conversation, nobody would know. So those conversations are hugely important, as well as understanding our connections. You know, librarians have huge connections. It's like when I think about the number of exciting opportunities I've had based on somebody else knows somebody else, and this is the person that you speak to, and it's one of our real skills, isn't it? And actually tapping into that, I think, is important. I'm going to bring Sue Williamson in now. Is there any successful collaborations you can think of?
Yes, I mean, I think I would say that there are a lot, but one of the ones that from a public library perspective is that when the task force came to an end, we set up a group of key sector stakeholders who were really engaged in the sector. So the British Library, Local Government Association, Arts Council England as the agency responsible for development of public libraries, Libraries Connected, and there's a fifth one, oh, CILIP, of course, CILIP, bringing those people together. And actually that sense of instead of people being in separate rooms having conversations and not actually coming together to understand, you know, where the differences were, how we could overcome the differences, how we could present a united front. Because the most important thing about, I mean, certainly from a public library perspective, is, you know, who are the people that you're trying most to influence? And it's a lot of the government departments that don't have a natural connection. So the Department of Education, the Department of Health, the Department of Justice, all of those departments have important work that they need doing that libraries can support. But actually getting those conversations is really quite difficult. So bringing the internal organizations together to present a united front, to put the point of view forward, I think was hugely important and really helpful. And that group of people was supported, and T'other Sue sat on that, by the head of service sounding board, so that we made sure that everything that that we took forward as an initiative was understood by the people who might actually want to implement it, and if they've got any issues with it, they were sorted out before somebody said they can do that. And we made sure that everybody was in alignment. So I think that's really important. I think also the other one I would say is the way in which I think Luke's example of the business and intellectual property centres is brilliant, but there is now a pathway from public libraries. There is a report that Arts Council published about the impact that libraries have on the employment agenda for people who are looking for work. There's the Business and Intellectual Property Centre Network, which supports entrepreneurs and new businesses. And there is also now money going into supporting businesses at the next stage of their development when they have a turnover of over 500,000. So we can actually say to the Department of Employment, right, public libraries support your employment agenda from the person who's on universal credit looking for a job right through to the person who's now got a turnover and is employing 7 or 8 people. That again, it's like a thread going through. And the final one I would point to, I think, is the and Sue mentioned the PKSB, is the fact that people who are now joining the profession, whatever part of the profession, are able to look at a career pathway going through, how they can develop their skills. So I mean, most local authorities will ask for GCSE English and Maths. And you arrive there, and now CILIP have produced, actually, I have it right here, this booklet that says, welcome to libraries. And it says, you've joined this profession, and this is what it stands for. And this is what you will be able to do in order to grow your career within that profession. The one thing which I think, and I would like to advocate for as I go forward in CILIP and next year as president, is the ability to move between sectors. We don't have that very much yet now. So we're not benefiting from the experience you guys have in school libraries, or the experience we have in public libraries, or in academic libraries, or in health libraries. It's not very easy to move between sectors, and I'd like to see that a little bit more.
We are certainly looking forward to that, Sue. Can I bring Ruth in? She's got a question.
Yeah, I was just thinking that talking about working with outside agencies from a school librarian's point of view on a much smaller scale feels to me like the librarian reaching out to the various departments and trying to build cross-departmental groups looking at some kind of particular aspect of the school's development plan. So one of the things that we are, well, it isn't in this year's development plan, but I'm sure will be in next, because we're a grammar school, is looking at those pupil premiums and making sure that we're picking those up. I've already spoken to the head about one initiative they've got, but and thinking about what we were talking about earlier about being active rather than passive, thinking about, okay, well, I could talk to, you know, the English department or the STEM department or whoever it is, maybe I could get something going and treat those departments like outside agencies effectively and build those partnerships within the school. So sorry, it's just a kind of,
no,
from somebody from the average school librarian can barely reach out. I mean, yeah, of course, you know, the reading agencies, there are lots of those things, but if you want to practice that sort of collaboration on a smaller scale, that might be a way to think about it.
Sounds perfect. Sue Williamson, can I bring you back in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, hang on, I'll lower my hand. I was just going to say, actually, that in terms of a resource that I know about, and I'm going to need to go back and see if I can find the name, and I'll let you have it. But there was an American scholar that came over a couple of years ago, Kellyanne Holmes, I think her name was, and she did a big project with STEM projects through libraries. And she started off in London, she ended up in Scotland, and she did a big report, and all of the resources are there. All of the resources are public and available for you to use. So going to your STEM group and saying, look, these are some of the projects. What is it that you want to try and really get across to your pupils? These are some of the projects that are going on in libraries across the world, because she's gone back to the States now. She was doing a graduate program, I think. These are some of the things that have been proven to work really well and to be fun, because that's what the library brings, isn't it? It brings that element of, it's not just about school and learning, it brings the enjoyment of it all. And that's what makes the library so special. And there's been quite a bit in the press recently, over the last week, about the increase in literacy levels, how we've gone up the table, but that doesn't talk at all about kids enjoying reading. Or enjoying STEM subjects, and that, you know, it's not just about being able to do, is it? It's about actually enjoying what it is you're doing and thinking and having that inquiring mind and wanting to go on and find out more. But I'll find out I mean, Luke, you may have them, but I'll see if I can find out the details, and I'll pass them on to Elizabeth.
That would be great, thank you. Luke, can I bring you in?
I think it's just a really important point that Sue Williamson makes there as well, and I think, you know, Sue was a big champion of reading for pleasure when she was in the Arts Council role before now, and I think that's something that I don't mean we as in this room, but as a sector, we're guilty of maybe forgetting or at risk of losing. Libraries are responsive and adaptive and step in, and public libraries did it during COVID, and they've managed to rebranded as warm spaces, even though they've always been warm spaces, and provide computer access and have been adaptive and fleet of foot. But actually, and again, not to speak for Sue Williamson because she's here, but I know it's a bugbear of hers when people say, "Oh, we're more than just books." Well, just books is okay. There is, if you do nothing, if a library provided nothing other than books and maybe computers, that would be fine. So it's great that they do serve other agendas and they support other priorities. But actually, I mean, I was fated to always, read. Both parents were librarians. Trained librarian. My daughter stands no chance. But it's not always the case for people, and actually picking something up, reading it, whatever it is. So this idea, this myth that young boys don't read at certain ages. Well, when I was at school, the kids were reading manga, or we're reading sport related stuff, or we're reading non-fiction. So I think it's about that reading for pleasure. I think it's still critical to it. So yes, absolutely do the other bits, but actually at the core of it, it's read something, whatever it's not that judgmental bit about it. It's just pick up something and benefit from it and get lost in the world of reading.
Absolutely. Sue, can I bring you back in?
Very briefly, and it's really basic, but we haven't mentioned it, is librarians, as we all know, are very friendly people, and we all love networking. So if you are feeling isolated, particularly as a school librarian, because often you're the only member of staff working in that school library, please reach out to your public library service, because that's such an easy thing to do. And even if it's a conversation that just two librarians having a conversation, or maybe it's the local library as well, but reach out to your public library service, because we're all librarians at heart. We all have the same ambitions, is to help our children, young people be really successful. And reading is such a key thing to make you successful. And we all know the figures and all the data. But don't miss the obvious. Please reach out to your public library service and introduce yourself, and kind of, can we work together on stuff? Because they will wrap their arms around you. Yes, let's do things together. So please don't forget that.
Absolutely. Sue, you had your hand up a second. Has it gone down again?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, I don't quite know why it went down again. I must have clicked something else. I was just going to also say that somebody earlier mentioned ASCIL, and of course, ASCIL is now a sector support organisation funded through the Arts Council, and I mean, I think the Arts Council's now changed its terminology, but that terminology, sector support organisation, that's what it's there to do. And it's not just a group of, I'm using that word just again, it isn't simply the librarians coming together. There is now a paid team who are there to support you guys in what it is you're doing. And then very new to the job, and they're just starting out, but they have a relationship manager in the Arts Council, and they are there to help in the same way that Libraries Connected has really grown over the last 5 years and supports the public library sector. So this was of huge interest to Arts Council, because Arts Council also has a department that deals with children and young people. So that business of bringing, children and young people, ASCIL together, the whole library network, and that support. And it isn't just about culture, it's about supporting every aspect of the work that you do and the development of that work. And that's what that team will be doing in the future. So I think it's, at the moment, it's a bit of a two-way street. What do you telling them what you want them to do, and then supporting you, but over time that will really grow and develop, and you'll find that should be really helpful.
Fantastic. Maybe, Sue, you can give me a link that I can probably share in the show notes that would be useful for everybody to find.
Luke should be, Luke will be able to do that now, because it's all, I'm retired.
That would be perfect. That would be perfect. Well, I've just noticed that the time is moving on, so I'm going to say one thing and then ask a final question. So I'm going to take this opportunity to promote my membership to any schools looking for ways to support collaboration between teachers and librarians primarily to help to boost independent learning, literacy and well-being through your school library. If you're not sure how to make this happen, my membership programme offers training and support for school librarians and teachers and creates opportunities to engage across the whole curriculum. You can find out more in the show notes below. So let's finish with one final question. I'm going to take us back to the school's aims and objectives. So it is, what role do the school's aims and objectives play in shaping the future of school libraries, and how can this be used to help drive positive change and innovation? Luke, can I start with you on that one, please?
Yeah.
Big question.
Yeah. So you cut out. Can you just ask it quickly?
So let me say it again. What role does the school's aims and objectives play in shaping the future of school libraries, and how can this be used to help drive positive change and innovation?
Well, I mean, it's kind of what we've been talking about the whole time we've been here, but it is that, that libraries are not there in isolation, so the libraries, I think we talked about them, whether it's a public library, it's part of a local authority, and as a school library, it's part of the school. So I think it's that danger of maybe not treating them as separate. They are an integral part to it. So hopefully the school's aims and objectives are the aims and objectives of that library as well. So it's trying to find that symbiotic link between them. So again, for me, it comes back to really doing that research and understanding where it is they're coming for, the aims and objectives that they're trying to achieve, and they should align. But again, it's about picking your battle. Sounds like a wrong word, because there is a lot of competing against a lot of agendas, and I think this idea of not having a school library is a nice to have. It's an essential. It's a critical. There's evidence here that suggests that your educational attainment and your life chances are improved by them being there. So again, it comes back to that evidence of knowing what you're saying, having the authoritative information to back it up, and then making the case, and maybe picking those bits that you can focus on. The danger is I suppose you want to get to that point where the first thought is, oh, well, we can go to the library for that, but there then becomes a point where you say, okay, but there's this, or there's that, the bits you can do. And I think there is a risk as well, I suppose, of that being asked to do ever more, and particularly in a school environment when everyone's asked to take on more and more as more priorities become apparent. And I think it's kind of what's the additional resource that comes with it. So as you build up that credibility, you're asking, you can do it, but you might need more to back you up in doing it. So I think there is it would be a strange or a worrying organisation if you couldn't align your aims and objectives with each other. But I think it's knowing, having a good understanding and a good grounding of where you're trying to go. And I think I definitely love taking away Sue Williamson's point of around not being passive, that not waiting for people to come to you. I mean, it's happened in public libraries where people are saying, people aren't coming in, and once they know what they can get, we'll get more of them in. Well, actually, it's maybe on us to go out a bit more and do that forward facing and making that point of what we're here and this is what we're doing. It's an expression I'm not massively fond of, but in the Northeast they like talking about shy bairns getting out, and you've got to put yourself out there and make people aware of you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Luke. Sue Wills, can I bring you in for that final question? Do you need me to ask it again?
No. And I think the critical thing here is driving positive change and innovation. So I've got 3 points I want to make. So first of all, and we've made this already, which is show how you're contributing to the school's overall aims. And that's true of any organisation you're working for and for all libraries. That's the first point. Because by doing that, you're demonstrating what an integral role the school library plays in making the school successful. And then a lot of that best practice is scalable. So my call to arms, really, my call to action is think about the things that are and share them as a think piece. Put them in a blog, put them on LinkedIn, put them on the Twitter feed for the School Library Association, contact CILIP. But don't just basically really talk about the good things that you're doing in your school and really promote. That's my call to action, if nothing else, is tell people what you are doing and connect. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Sue. And Sue Williamson, can I bring you back in for that final question?
Well, I think Luke and Sue have said quite a lot. The one thing I would probably add to that is I would look at what's keeping your head teacher awake at night. What's the biggest problem he or she has got in their school? You know, what are their top 3 priorities? Whatever the service plan says, what are the things that are keeping him awake at night? And then I would think, right, what do I do? What do I go into him and say, right, these are your problems. This is what we can do to help you sort them.
Amazing. What a brilliant way to finish. Thank you so much. So thanks for joining me today, Sue, Luke, Ruth and Sabrina. It's been really interesting and fascinating to chat to you. I hope we've given you a little more understanding about what online resources are available for school librarians and opportunities to provide that we are talking about the aims and objectives. I hope we have covered, you know, lots of ideas and ways to move forward. As always, if you'd like to comment on anything you've heard this evening, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on future discussions. Thank you for listening and good night.